Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, gats and kittens, my dominant heron, comic fans from all over the world. Welcome back to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's not waste another second of your precious YouTube time. Garrett Davis, I am saddened by Alain Delon's death, and I'm curious what your favorite film with him is. I love Le Samurai. I also am fond of Red Sun with Bronson and Mifune. Alain Delon, along with Jean-Paul Belmondo, they owned French cinema in the 60s, in the 70s, and into the 80s. These were the two biggest stars, and they were international stars. Not as well known in the United States as they should be, but world famous throughout Europe, Asia, and Latin America, and deservedly so. Along with Brigitte Bardot, probably the biggest international stars ever to come out of France. And Delon was in every genre you can possibly imagine. Excellent actor, but also, a devastatingly handsome guy, good-looking guy. And he seemed to fit in anywhere. Of course, Red Sun, I love Red Sun. But what's not to love? It's Bronson, it's Alain Delon, it's Toshiro Mifune, and Ursula Andress, and rip-snorting, violent, beautifully photographed Euro Western. I don't know if it qualifies as a spaghetti Western, but it was shot in Spain. It is a Euro Western, and it's a blast. Now, Bronson and Delon, I assume, had some sort of a mutual admiration society, because this wasn't the only movie they appeared in together, and had chemistry in. There's a really good heist film called Farewell Friend, where a pair of army guys on leave decide to rob a bank for their safe deposit boxes. And it's a great buddy film, and also a great heist and trap film, with the usual deconstructed plot line that every great heist film must have. And of course, Le Samurai, which you mentioned, one of the great Melville crime classics. This really put the stamp on the French crime drama throughout the 60s into the 70s. And it's, a classic. And these films, these crime films with Delon and others, Lino Ventura and others, really changed the way crime films and police films were shot. These films had an enormous influence on William Friedkin, making The French Connection, and that influence continues on into the 70s. As more and more police films were made here, all heavily influenced by what the French do. I've said it before, I'll say it again. No one makes a better cop thriller and crime thriller than the French. I think it's largely because they're so morally conflicted that you never know what's going to happen in one of their movies. Speaking of which, Delon was terrific as basically the Tom Ripley character in this in Purple Noon, which was one of the better adaptations of a Patricia Highsmith novel, with Delon playing the enigmatic, charismatic Ripley character. I don't believe he was named Ripley in this movie, but it's based on one of Patricia Highsmith's excellent and creepy Ripley novels. To Kill a Cop it's minor Delon, but I like it. It's a straight up private eye flick. Delon gets in trouble. Every French gangster and every French cop is looking for him throughout Paris, and he escapes from one narrow jam after another throughout. And it's just a feel good classic private eye story, and I dig it. Another one, probably considered minor Delon later in his career, Un Crime. I don't know if I'm pronouncing crime in French correctly, but A Crime is the title of the movie, in which he plays a lawyer who thinks he has all the answers but doesn't. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, Delon was a prolific filmmaker, and he made a lot of terrific films, a lot of not so terrific films, and a lot of films that are just he basically carried on his back because this guy was charisma plus. Michael Boberg, when that last awful Fantastic Four movie came out, I recall reading that Fox had to make anything with FF, or else they'd lose the IP. Could it be the parent companies of the big two are printing comics for the sole purpose of keeping the IP? They lose a little bit of money every month publishing so they can try to hit the jackpot on a movie. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Why else pay rock bottom prices for rock bottom talent when you could actually turn a consistent profit by paying twice as much and getting a competent writer? What do you think? Well, I do think the last few Fantastic Four movies have been wretched. The next one doesn't look to be any better. A lot of times this is a consideration. I'm not real clear on copyright and trademark laws, but apparently, if you don't have something in publication or you don't have something in production within a certain amount of time, you lose your rights to it. You can't just buy licensed things and let them lie dormant, which is a protection for the licensee and ultimately the creators, because a lot of times in Hollywood, dirty little secret, they'll option things just to take them off the table. They'll option a property with absolutely no intention of ever doing anything with it to keep it out of the hands of another studio or out of the hands of another creator. They're spiteful that way. They're nasty out there in Hollywood. Watch your back. As soon as you get off the plane, as soon as you get off that red eye, your head's got to be on a swivel, baby, because everybody's out to knife you in the back. But the thing is, in some cases, this need to secure IP leads to the creation of whole new characters. Superboy and Supergirl were created simply so that someone else didn't create a Superboy or Supergirl. DC wanted to own everything super, so that Superman did not simply imply that anything super would belong to them. So they had to create all of these, super horse, super dog, super cat, Superboy, Supergirl, super everything, in order to make sure no one infringed on their property at all. And this was a driving thing, and this was a real thing. A 2-bit publisher, a fly-by-night outfit, could have come up with a Superboy and made a fortune off of it. It's much like domain names. If you don't grab a domain name right away, somebody else will grab it, and they'll make you pay through the nose to get it. And this is the reason why Marvel created She-Hulk. Hulk was so popular on television that they thought, well, somebody could create a female version of this same character. We got to cover our bases and create, She-Hulk. Same thing with Spider-Woman. When the Spider-Man movies back in the 70s appeared on CBS, they did quite well in the ratings and with the cartoons and everything else. Marvel thought, well, we've got to cover our bases here and make sure nobody but us creates a Spider-Woman. So She-Hulk and Spider-Woman, as you can tell from their original iterations, are created, as a way to hold on to IP. There really wasn't any plans to turn them into anything other than that, but later creators did. Later creators grabbed onto these characters and made something of them, thinking particularly of She-Hulk during the John Byrne run, and Spider-Girl, the long Spider-Girl run with Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz, where they took these created for convenience characters and actually did something with them. Now DC, they were asleep at the wheel. They created Wonder Woman, but they didn't think about Wonder Man. And of course, Marvel jumped right all over that. So DC lost that opportunity forever. There would never be a DC Wonder Man. So you see how this works. In recent years, from my own experience, Marvel has begun publishing omnibuses of the Sigil series from CrossGen. And I assume the only reason to do this is to maintain the IP that Disney spent $500,000 to obtain, and they haven't done anything with it. So let's reprint these. And I'm sure these are break even or loss leader kind of collections, but maybe not. And I got to give Marvel credit. I don't know what the Mystic or Meridian omnibuses look like, or omnibuy, however you say that. But I did get a copy of the Sigil one, and boy, they did a bang up job. I mean, it's got every Sigil story from everywhere and lots of back matter. If you were a fan of Sigil back across Gen, um, this is everything you could possibly hope for. I mean, they dug through the files, they dug through the hard drives and found everything and put it in here, which was pretty cool. I hope they do that for Way of the Rat someday. Just for my own selfish interest. But I'm assuming if they're already doing this with the earliest cross-gen titles, that they will continue on and do all of the rest in order to retain the rights to that IP. Kian Kurji, you mentioned that you have some knowledge about guns. As a person who knows practically nothing about guns myself, what would you say are the things that Hollywood gets wrong the most? Well, years and years and years ago, when I first got on the internet, I came up with gun mistakes every writer makes. And they're still pertinent today. I still see them all the time. So I'll go through them with you. And my experience with guns, my dad was a gunsmith. I grew up with guns all over the house, especially just before hunting season. Seemed like every deer hunter didn't think about getting their rifle repaired until 2 weeks before hunting season. And so I remember days where there were shotguns and rifles everywhere, and literally our dining room walls were just row after row of shotguns and rifles leaning there. And I'm no gun expert by any means. I mean, Dwayne Thomas, who might even be listening here, he's asked questions a few times, is a absolute certified, firearms expert. But I know what's wrong when I see it. The silenced revolver is one that always annoys me. Now, what a silencer does is it traps the gases and everything else from a discharged firearm into baffles. And it doesn't really silence the gun, but it muffles it to some degree. It's still going to make a noise and it's still going to be loud, but it's not going to be as loud or as reverberating or carry over as long a distance. That's how a silencer works. It traps gases. Now, it works on an automatic because an automatic is a sealed system. A revolver famously is not a sealed system. There is a gap between the revolver cylinder, 6-shooter, if you will. There's always a gap remaining between the cylinder and the opening of the barrel, because gases have to, first of all, the wheel, the revolver part of the revolver, the thing that revolves, has to be able to revolve. So you need some clearance there, both in the front and the back. And if you stick a silencer on it, the gases are just going to escape around the cylinder. So you're not going to lose a lot of noise here. It's still going to sound loud as hell. And you're going to have, the gases that you're meant to trap are just going to escape another way. So the silencer revolver, that's a no-no. You got to cancel that one out. The empty automatic. We've seen this one a million times. The bad guy or the good guy, they're ready to give their opponent the coup de grace, and click. The automatic is out of bullets. Unfortunately, for filmmakers and TV producers, when an automatic is empty, the top slide, that thing you see, them slide back to put around the chamber, when an automatic is empty, that slide remains in the back position. So you can look at an automatic and pistol and tell that it's empty. Unlike a revolver, you can't really tell. But with an automatic, you can tell because the top slide will be locked back. So that's a no-no. That's a boo-boo. The super accurate sniper rifle. You'll see a movie about a sniper and he's, engaging the target and he's zeroing in on them and he puts that crosshairs right on that guy's head. He's going to blow his head off, which, he always does. And that's not the way sniper rifles work. You can't, there's distance, there's windage. You've got to figure all that out to know where to place those crosshairs. You may want to place those crosshairs 3 feet above your target's head. First of all, you shouldn't go for a headshot. They're too risky. You want to go for a sensor shot. But even then, you've got to place your, given windage, given distance, given even the temperature of the day, you're going to want to place that crosshairs above your target, and maybe possibly a little to the left or a little to the right, depending on the wind. And also, I mean, bullets do not fly straight. They fly anything but straight. They make, especially over distance, they arc, and they're going to begin to fall. So if you're shooting at a target, if you happen to be a high class, high paid professional sniper, and you're shooting at a target, 600 yards away, 1,000 yards away, you've got to know that you're not going to shoot that guy with a bullet. You're basically going to drop a bullet on that guy. So that's how that works. And so you don't, more and more though, lately I've seen that they're treating snipers with some degree of accuracy. They're hiring technical advisors who are, probably more insistent on the set. That's a problem with hiring a technical advisor. You got to listen to them. And in a lot of cases, I'll say Saving Private Ryan, they actively would not listen to the technical advisor. They just paid him his paycheck and said, look, you just, go get yourself some donuts and coffee. We're going to do this our way, Mr. History. Cordite. You'll always hear about the stink of cordite. There was a gunfire, guns blazing, the room full of gun smoke, and the stink of cordite. I made this mistake. Every writer makes this mistake until they learn better. I included this in a early script that I did for Larry Hama. I mentioned the smell of cordite. And I got a phone call from Larry Hama that seemed to last forever. I know it was only a few minutes, but I was called on the mat. I was sent to the principal's office. Mom caught me with my hand in the cookie jar. And Larry Hama explained to me that cordite was a chemical used in the manufacture of gunpowder at one arsenal. I believe it was in India. I believe it might have been the Dum Dum Arsenal in India. It was used there for only a few years and never used again. So cordite is something that appeared for a very brief time in the history of firearms. And yet writers still refer to cordite today. It's a cliche. It is something that someone who doesn't really know everything about firearms just assumes as a fact. And, they stick cordite in to make it seem like they know what they're talking about, but they don't. Much like I did not know what I was talking about until Larry Hama took me to school, as he often did, and I still appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Hama. I learned so much. Kerchak! All seen that movie. This one really makes me nuts. You got the hero or the bad guy, and he's holding people with a pump shotgun. He's making them, do what he wants to do. Get in the trunk, or stay right there, or don't make a sound. And he's trained this shotgun on them. Or he's in a desperate situation. He's holding off 6 guys coming toward him. He's holding that shotgun, and for emphasis, he pumps around into it, makes that awesome kerchak sound, that metallic warning sign of that a 12 gauge is being chambered. Problem with this is, up to that point, he either wasted a round by doing that, he ejected the round that was in the chamber at the time, or the entire time during this dramatic scene, he was threatening them with a weapon that was not ready to fire, that was not charged. So it doesn't make any sense. It just takes me right out of a movie when they do that. And yeah, for dramatic purposes, yeah, I guess it's real cool if you don't know anything at all about guns, but it's really stupid in reality. You would never do that. If you were getting serious with a shotgun, you would make sure a round was chambered, as you would be sure with any gun. Shooting sideways. This one, yeah, okay, you may think this looks cool, but you're not going to hit anything, which, we learn. I mean, look at, drive-by shootings. So the many drive-by shootings in our urban areas, in which hundreds and hundreds of rounds are fired, and unfortunately some people get hit, but it's generally never the people that the shooters were aiming at. Too many times, tragically, it's someone who wasn't even involved in the incident, or was in bed or watching television in their living room, suddenly gets sprayed with 9mm because some moron out on the street is firing a gun the way he saw Tupac firing. The problem with firing sideways is the natural reaction of the recoil of the gun, if you're firing vertically, is the gun goes up, and then you have to bring it back down on target. And you have to be aware of the kick. When you're doing it sideways, it's kicking your arm to one side, generally to the right. So you got to bring your arm back, and you're firing sideways. It's kicking your arm out further. You're getting further off of target each time you fire, and you have to return your sights back on, and it doesn't make any sense. Finding your target vertically is much easier. You're just bringing your arm down. It's more natural motion. Firing sideways is just ridiculous. Also, it's a good way to catch a hot spent round in the eye. Doing it that way. Okay, the wall slide. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Every 70s and 80s cop movie, same thing. The cops are in a tenement building shooting it out with some lowlife, and they slide along the wall. They're taking the wall for cover. First of all, drywall and plaster lathe. They're not bulletproof. You can fire right through them. But they're sliding down the wall because they think, well, this offers me some degree of cover. It's the worst place to be. And I only know this because I read this massive tome, and all it was reports. It was after action reports of police shootings. And it was so informative about what actually happens during a gunfight. And one of the things that was stated over and over and over again in this book, it was an instructional book for cops. It wasn't like something you go to Barnes & Noble and buy. And one of the most instructive things in there that was repeated over and over again in a lot of these fights was how many times cops got wounded by bullets that tracked along the wall. So they would basically, not bounce off the wall because drywall, plaster, lath gives. So the bullet would just make a groove in the plaster and just sort of stay on that trajectory, just following the wall. And if you're sliding along the wall, you're going to be the first thing that bullet hits. So you don't want to be against the wall. It's not a protection. You want to be, in the middle of the hallway, which seems like would be the most dangerous place. In reality, reading these police after action reports, the thing that struck me most was that the tactic in almost 99.9% of the police shooting situations was they fired off a flurry of shots and then sought cover very quickly and then shouted dire threats from cover. And that seemed to be, and that to me would be the most sensible. Hey, I'm going to just blast away at this guy. If I hit him, I hit him. But if I don't, I'm going to make sure he doesn't hit me. And then I'm going to tell him, hey, backup's on the way. You got no chance, brother. We're going to fill you full of lead. Whatever you need to do to keep that guy from shooting at you anymore. So that seems to be the way all the police shooting goes. And I'm not laughing with the cop, or at the cops. I'm laughing with them because any cop listening to this knows, that's the way these things go. Because generally when you're in a gunfight with a guy with a record, once he starts shooting at cops, Katie bar the door. There's nothing this guy won't do. So you're up against a bad hombre at that point. Looks like a 9 or a 38. We've all seen this scene where the detective is standing over the body and, in older movies actually sticks his finger in the bullet hole, which you don't want to do. Or just assesses the hole in the guy's body or in his clothing. And, he's pretty sure what caliber it is the guy was shot with. This is ridiculous. When a bullet enters, it causes all kinds of incredible, horrible body trauma. And it's basically a really nasty puncture wound on one side, and then a ghastly exit wound on the other. And there's no way looking at the hole, because the hole it's not like Fearless Fosdick, or a cartoon character where the hole just remains the same width across as the bullet fired. The hole swells because the body has received trauma. It fills with fluid, blood, other body fluids, and the hole closes up, and it looks like a puckered star. So it's impossible to tell. The only bullet you can reasonably tell by the hole it makes is a 223 or 5.56 round, generally fired from an M4 or an M16. Famously, that round over a certain distance will begin to tumble. It'll begin to tumble end on end. So the wound from a 223 5.56 will look like a keyhole. They call that a keyhole wound. So that one you can tell. So there you go. Those are my big gun mistakes. I'm sure Dwayne Thomas might chime in if he's listening and have a few more, or correct everything I said and say, yeah, everything Chuck told you is wrong. And I will bow to that, because Mr. Thomas, as I said, is a certified firearms expert. But I think he'll mostly agree with what I just told you. P.M. Ufferman. I believe in a past episode you had expressed a fondness for George MacDonald Fraser's Flashman series. The historical setting for these books is interesting, but what I really love is the humor of a cowardly rogue exhibiting less than ideal traits, yet through various circumstances is recognized as the hero of the story. Typically, after trying everything they can do to avoid whatever responsibility conflict they are supposed to overcome. A similar character comes to mind is Sandy Mitchell's Caiaphas Cain character. I'm wondering if you might have any other recommendations for similar heroes. I never heard of Caiaphas Cain. I'll have to look that up. Flashman, which was a series of novels by George MacDonald Fraser and one unfortunate film adaptation, is about a Victorian hero. He's awarded the Victorian Cross and everything else. And he's famously at like every major battle of the early Victorian era. He's at the Crimea. He's at the Chargeville Light Brigade. He's at the Thin Red Line. He's eventually at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He's at Gettysburg. He's at fighting with the Afghanis in the withdrawal from Kabul. He's all over the place. And he's a coward and a rogue and beyond a womanizer. He's basically a creep, but he's the one telling the story, and he's brutally honest, and you got to respect him for his brutal honesty in talking about what a complete cad and a bounder he is, and which, for my money, makes the stories all the more entertaining. Who wants to hear a hero telling you how heroic he was? Instead, Flashman's telling you what a craven a coward he is. And he witnesses history through that eye. Now, every once in a while, events push even Flashman to not what I would call an act of courage, but an act of desperate self-preservation in which he comes off as somewhat of a badass. But those moments are rare in these books. Mostly he's caught lying, cheating with another man's wife. He's just really a creep, but I love him. You can't help but love him because he's so brutally honest, and the books are wonderful. I can't think of a lot of main characters who fit anywhere near this bill. I mean, none of them are as much of a rogue as Flashman is. I think of Maverick. Now, Maverick was a nicer guy, had more redeeming values, and was capable of being a tough guy. But for the most part, would rather talk his way out of a fight than fight. He did not want to fight anybody. This became the persona that James Garner would adopt for most of the roles he played throughout his acting career. Was a guy who certainly looked like he could fight his way out of a situation. And James Garner liked to fight. He wasn't anything like the characters he played. He was famous for getting into fistfights at traffic accidents, and he famously punched out a TV producer on the set of Rockford. But the Maverick character is a guy who would rather connive. He's not a coward, but he'll he'll think about leaving the damsel in distress and maybe even leave her in distress if it's to save his hide. If he has to get out of town ahead of a posse or a lynch squad, he's going to do it. And this is what made it so refreshing to TV viewers and made Garner a star and made the Maverick series so popular, is because he was a true Western anti-hero in that he was mostly concerned with his own self-preservation. And for all of that, seemed like a more engaging character than the usual stalwart, Western tough guy. He was anything but that, and it made it fun. The only other example I can think of, other than sidekicks, because fiction's full of cowardly sidekicks, or venal, self-interested sidekicks. But the only other one I can think of is Bob Hope. Bob Hope, in film after film, especially after this film, The Cat and the Canary, he developed this on-screen personality, which he hadn't previously done. He was a vaudeville entertainer. He was a song and dance man. He performed a lot of different functions in live theater. But when he got to movies, in his second film, a remake of the silent classic Cat and Canary, he develops what we would come to know as Bob Hope's screen persona, the cowardly braggart, self-interested, always interested in his own self-preservation, the kind of guy who would, if he thought he had the upper hand, would wisecrack and verbally abuse you, and of course that would immediately he would turn into a quivering pile of jelly the moment he realized that he no longer had the upper hand. And Hope based a lot of his comedy on this character. He played basically the same character in every movie that he made throughout his career, and very successfully and very funny. I mean, he was good at it, playing the guy who is looking for the exit while everybody else is looking to fight. He's very much the like J. Wellington Wimpy, lets you and him fight kind of character. So, but those are the only ones I can think of, and I thought hard about this. Maybe you folks have some others, and I will check out this character that you suggested, because I'm real curious. Kane Dorr, your opening to today's video about getting more views from videos in Home Depot reviewing router bits might bring in more views than comics was very funny. Well, thank you, but it's true. Everything that's really funny is true. The minute you said it, my brain went to Frank Castle's Microchip sidekick assistant character, who is not a coward. Microchip is unlike other sidekicks. He was a pretty heroic guy. I'll be interested in seeing if The Horseman has a sidekick assistant. I'm very excited for that book. The Horseman, coming out soon, or even out right now, I'm not sure when this video drops, is a creation of Joe Bennett and myself for the Rippaverse. And he's very much, he was born out of the fact that Joe Bennett, while we were working on Alpha Core #1, said, you know what Rippaverse needs? They need a Punisher, Batman kind of street level vigilante, a non-powered superhero kind of guy. And I thought, hey, you don't need to twist my arm. And I came up with a Horseman, which is kind of a variation of Batman, kind of a variation on the Punisher, but there's several important differences. He does not, I've written Horseman #2, and he does not currently have a sidekick. He's keeping his secret identity to himself primarily, but he does have, family that cares about him and everything else who know what he's doing at night and don't approve. So he's different from Batman and the Punisher in that he still has surviving family members that he cares about and needs to protect. But like the Punisher, there's a profit motive here as well. He's keeping the family fed in their adopted city of Florispark by, taking down drug dealers and keeping the cash, to fund his further war on crime. The Horseman is a character who does what he does basically because he just doesn't know how to do anything else. And I think you'll find him kind of refreshing. He's not the same as every other vigilante character. I really, because I've written so many vigilante characters, try to make them distinguishable from each other. And in this case, the Horseman fits that bill as well. So I hope you enjoy it. And we will, once it's released, we will talk about it further. Gene Pugno. I have not heard any inquiries regarding this one Batman story in particular, The Chalice. Looks like readers are more interested in continuity than a one-shot. My question would be about your working relationship with John Van Fleet. His style is not like the usual ones as the other artists that you have worked with. How were you paired with John on this project? I like the book a lot. It has this, dare I say, cutting-edge graphics quality to it. What do you think of his atmospheric art style and the collaboration itself? Well, John Van Fleet approached the Batman offices with the idea of doing this story of Batman searching for the Holy Grail. And he's either Denny or Scott Peterson suggested I might be interested in doing it because they knew I do the historical homework. They knew this is something that might interest me because I'm a bit of a history buff. And the research was fun. John had done a lot of it himself, but I did some more. I bought a couple of books on the Grail, and it's a fascinating story, the Grail itself. And like you said, John has an illustrative style, a more cutting edge style than the usual comic book stuff. And it suited this. I mean, it was his project. I mean, he came to me with the basic plot and basic concept. I just, supplied the dramatic moments. Not supplied the dramatic moments. He had plenty of dramatic moments built into his pitch to Denny and Scott and to me. But I had to get us there. I had to figure out the different relationships, and I don't know if it was, I don't know if it was my idea to bring Catwoman into it as well, because it is a bit of a heist story or a mystery story. Finding the Grail and securing it. Batman largely wants to get the Grail to keep it out of the hands of bad guys. Catwoman, of course, wants to steal it. But it was cool working with John. We worked on another project together called The Ankh, which was another project that was also his idea. And I dug it. I liked working on it, and it did well. It did well enough to go from hardcover to paperback editions. I don't know if it's ever been collected recently, though. And working on Batman one-shots was cool. It was like writing a Batman movie. So I had a lot of fun on it. But John did all the heavy lifting with this awesome evocative artwork he did. Ramerfan 1. Did you write the first Conan comic book stories that had no element of magic, sorcery, fantasy, straight up adventure? If so, where? Savage Sword of Conan, which issues? I'm not an issues guy. I know there's people out there that can say, well, that was in issue 336. I've never been that. But yes, a lot of my early Savage Sword of Conans featured didn't have a mystical element to them. I did a number of stories about the Pictish War until Larry said, stop doing that. Move him around a little. I think Gary got tired of drawing Picts and forests. So we moved him around a little. But, I had him facing all kinds of supernatural things in other issues, vampires, werewolves, wizards, and all the rest. My earliest problems with Conan, as much as I love Conan, was steeped in the lore and conversant with the character, was I wasn't comfortable writing about magic. Magic just seemed silly to me. It seemed to have no basis in reality. It was an easy deus ex machina. Magic, writing a lot of magic into a story would lead to lazy writing. I didn't want to do that. I saw Conan as primarily an action story, historical action story. And early on, Larry Hama warned, don't do Wizard of the Week, Monster of the Month stories, where the story was all about the wizard and what he could do, or the monster and what they could do. Make it about more than that. So I would have, conflicts within the group that Conan was in, or a ticking clock kind of thing, or whatever. But early on, I talked to Gary about this, who was Gary Quapis, my most frequent collaborator on this title, most frequent collaborator ever. I've worked more with Gary than any other artist. And I told him about my reticence about using magic. And he said that, because Gary's a thinker, a real smart guy. And he said, well, I think magic works as long as there's always a price to be paid. And I went, hey, that's pretty cool. I like that. He said, like every time the guy uses magic, his face becomes more scarred, or he loses a finger, or something like that. there's a price to be paid for using the magic that, you know, is as much a threat to the magic wielder as it is to his victims. And but largely I mixed up the stories between straight up badass historical adventure, sword and sandal kind of stuff without any mystical elements, and then would mix in, you know, the stuff with magic and supernatural creatures. And of course, early on, I think I wrote like maybe 5 or 6 issues of Savage Sword, and that's when Larry informed me that the H.P. Lovecraft monsters had become public domain. And so that I was able, I never felt right naming them, but I was able to use the Lovecraft mythos, which is perfect fit for Conan, since Howard had written Lovecraftian type stories, was a member of the Weird Tales Lovecraft Circle, perfect fit for Conan. And so I began mixing in a lot of Lovecraft horror, which made a lot more sense to me than the magic stuff, because there was a history there and a reason why these creatures existed, and, you know, why they would be alive in Conan's time. So there you go. But issue numbers, I don't know. So just buy them all. I think the next omnibus from Titan begins my run with Gary Kwapis and Ernie Chan. So you might want to wait for that, and that means the next few omnibuses will be mostly my stuff. Ace Mowick, what is your honest opinion on the women in refrigerators critique made by your former colleague? There is a validity with some observations, but also seems to be missing the context in others. Not to mention that some folks who have never read comics, mind you, took this topic and exaggerated it to the point of ridiculousness so that it lost its original point. Yeah, I vaguely remember this. A lot of these controversies and ados and brouhahas that get involved in comics where everybody's a buzz, everybody's talking about it, I tend to ignore, because first of all, they don't impact me. And secondly, there's a lot of score settling going on. But, and I never got involved in any of this stuff. I remember this, and I remember it was a Green Lantern issue, Kyle Rayner, Ron Mars written, and his girlfriend's found dead in a refrigerator. I don't remember much more about it, but I remember people were upset. They were upset about it. And, to some extent, I agreed with them. Without going into all, I never asked anybody, what's this all about? Please explain this to me. Or read letters in Comics Buyer's Guide going on and on and on about it. I just didn't get involved or sit at the bar after the convention and hash this out. I never did that, so I can't say I'm well informed over the protests. I do know that the contemporary you're probably talking about is Gail Simone, and I don't think she was alone in complaining about the treatment of the woman in question in the refrigerator in question. But it's kind of weird. DC has a very checkered history with both female characters and female creators. Now, I'm going to say some stuff here that might not be very popular. It might get me in trouble, but it won't get me in trouble because I won't pay any attention to it. If I get in trouble for this, I'll probably never know about it because I just don't listen. I'm going to say some things that are possibly unpopular, but they're coming from the best place. DC. I was aware when I worked at DC, even if they weren't aware of it, there was this unconscious zeitgeist about the mistreatment of women. Now, I made my bones writing strong female characters. I was never comfortable with having them be abused in any way or anything misogynistic. I didn't even like my female heroines being hostages, or shown as needing rescuing. And this doesn't come from a feminist angle. It just comes from, I like my heroes to be badasses. And if I'm writing a female hero, she's not infallible. She has flaws. She's human just like everybody else. But in the end, she's going to triumph. And she darn sure isn't going to get taken prisoner or taken hostage. That just ain't going to happen. Black Canary's not going to put up with that. But yes, there is, and it really came crystal clear to me when we were working on Nightfall and more particularly Night Quest. If you remember Nightfall, Bruce Wayne as Batman gets his back broken by Bane, and it looks like that's the end. His spine's broken. He'll never be the same man. But he finds a character created by Doug Mensch, Dr. Kinsolving, and she has this therapy, you know, sort of new age kind of therapy, mind over matter kind of thing, and she guides Bruce Wayne back to full health through this thing. And I remember being at the summit where we were talking about this, and basically we had come to the end of Dr. Kinsolving's story, and I thought, well, you know, this is a character that would be put aside and maybe reintroduced in another story if need be, or we just completely forget she ever existed. But someone said, well, how are we going to kill her? And the assumption was now her story was over, she had to die. And I said, well, why does she have to die? And it came to me all of a sudden. I said, you know, we've got a terrible history here of female characters. And we just killed Commissioner Gordon's wife recently. We keep shedding these female characters, and there's no reason why we have to kill this character. She's done nothing wrong. Why can't we just keep her around? She might be useful in the future. But I was completely voted down. It was just like, this is the way it has always been done. You know, it's like, ape shall not kill ape. Female character cannot exist once their usefulness is at an end. It's like, wow. And, you know, this wasn't from misogynists or anti-feminists or, you know, the He-Man Woman Haters Club. This just seemed to be the way things were done at DC. And it was hard not to take it personally when they killed Spoiler not once, but twice, apparently. I just found out recently they killed her again. I don't know if she's currently alive in continuity. And the first time they killed her was horrible. It was like this, had all these psychosexual ramifications. She was tortured to death. I mean, why would you do that? What did Spoiler ever do to you that you had to be this awful to her? And this extends beyond the characters. Now, here's where it really gets, here's where I'm really dancing close to the flames on the subject of the women of DC, women writers. I realized early on that DC had a rule similar to Highlander, was that, you know, yes, we have a female writer at DC, but there can be only one. And over time, I watched them, over my time at DC, I watched them be replaced one by one. Louise Simonson gave way to Sarah Byam. This is not a picture of Sarah Byam. I couldn't find a picture of Sarah Byam, but I thought, this looks like a woman of mystery. Sarah Byam gave way to Joe Duffy. Joe Duffy gave way to Devin Grayson. And Devin Grayson gave way to Gail Simone. And who knows who's next? I don't know who currently writes at DC. Maybe they've got a dozen women writers now. Maybe that rule is no longer extant. But if you look, there's no real overlap. It's like they would fire one female writer and hire another one. You know, most of these people writing did not write simultaneously for the company, which I just found strange. You know, all of these women were talented, but apparently they just didn't want too many girls in the clubhouse. I don't know. I don't get it. And like I so often say, DC's got a lot of weird rules, a lot of weird stuff. I was just talking today to a former editor of mine, and I brought this up, and he brought up a few things that he could tell me, and then I said, you know, but what about this and what about that? And he still wouldn't tell me. You know, still wouldn't tell me why this and why that. No. Those will go to the grave with all of my former DC editors. No one will tell you what the hell was going on behind the scenes there at that company. Okay, well, I hope that entertained you. I'm probably in all kinds of trouble on websites I never visit. for what I just said, but it's true. And it's true. And I can say this, ladies, I'm looking out for you. You know, I'm pointing this out because I thought it was wrong. You know, I'm not pointing it out with any kind of schadenfreude whatsoever. You earned your place at the table and they took it away from you because, you know, there was only one chair. So there you go. And I'm only laughing because I'm thinking about all the trouble I'm going to hear about second, third hand. You hear what this person said about you? Yeah, okay. And I can assure you, none of them will have watched this video. They'll only hear from someone else what I said, misquoted and out of context. Hey, brunobookstore@gmail.com. If you want to send me hateful emails about what I just said and call me a misogynist and a woman-hating bastard, then brunobookstore@gmail.com is the place to go. Or you can be like the fine folks who asked the awesome questions we have this week. You can do like they did, and they sent their questions to me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the most reliable way to reach me. And that's it for this week. Rough and tumble. Hope you learned something. I did. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, however you reacted to what I just said. And I'll see